Welcome back to another episode of The Road Chose Me. Here I am back in the driveway. I've come all the way back from the Alaska Highway. And on today's episode, I'm going to talk about something that no one else in the industry ever seems to touch on. And that is the 3 most important criteria when you're deciding on a piece of equipment to add to your Overland vehicle. So when there's multiple different options, how do you decide which one is appropriate or the best for your setup? And you know, it comes back to that old thing of when it comes to overlanding, bigger is not always better. We have to walk a fine line. There's a balance to strike. How do we decide where to draw the line? Stick around. I'm going to get into all those details right now. To frame this whole discussion, I'm going to talk about which air compressor I run in my Jeep. And that'll help you understand these 3 criteria that I use to decide. But remember, this applies to everything you're going to add to your vehicle, not just an air compressor. This is just my example for today's discussion. So this is the ARB single air compressor. It's been brilliant. It's been there for all 5 years around Africa and is never missed a beat. But people are always shocked that I only have the single and I don't have the dual. And so the dual, no doubt about it, it's twice as big, but the big win is that it airs up your tires faster. And so that is always the metric that everyone always talks about. It's faster, so you should have one. And that always kind of surprises me because overlanding isn't a race. We're not short on time. We want to have these experiences out in the wilderness. So the fact that it takes me an extra 4 or 5 minutes to air up my tires, it's never bothered me once. You know, I aired up my tires probably 200 times while I was driving around Africa, and I attach the air hose and then I grab a cold drink. I talk to some locals, maybe I eat an apple or a snack. You know, those extra few minutes, never once did it bother me. So I find it kind of interesting that marketing would always focus on the aspect of this particular product that kind of is irrelevant. It's not even something that I care about. So that brings me around to what are the 3 things that I care about. And criteria number 1 is really obvious. It's how big is the item that you're thinking of adding to your vehicle, or how much space does it physically take up? As overlanders, we're all limited by the amount of space in and on our vehicles. And so if you add too many big things, you're just going to run out of space and you're not going to be able to bring other things that you want. Maybe then you'll be limited on food or clothes or even just books so you can actually enjoy yourself. So when it came to an air compressor, this single is literally half the size of the dual. And so that alone was a really good, reason for me to choose this one. It just takes up so much less space. And that's also why I mounted it here under the hood. Lots of people put them under their passenger seat. Yeah, that's a good spot too. But actually, I have a locking security drawer there that has really important paperwork in it and, spare money and credit cards. So by putting it here under the hood, I freed up that interior space, for other things that I really wanted to bring. So before you're going to add something to your vehicle, when you're weighing off pros and cons, different items, think about how much space it takes up and don't buy it, especially an air compressor, just because it airs up your tires faster. That's not necessarily a win. Buy it because it takes up less space and then you'll have more space for other things, or even just so you can have interior living space and escape the rain and the mosquitoes. So that's criteria number 1. Criteria number 2 is also something that doesn't get talked about a whole lot. And again, as overlanders, it's something we're all limited in, and that is how heavy is the item that you're thinking about adding to your vehicle. So again, we're all limited on payload, sometimes severely. This is a Jeep Wrangler. This thing is not a 1-ton pickup. It doesn't have an enormous payload. So literally every item you add, you should scrutinize and you should carefully think about what's going to happen to your payload if you add that. By definition, if I get the dual compressor, I've just reduced the amount of other stuff that I can bring with me simply because of payload. And again, is airing up my tires a couple of minutes faster? Is that really worth reducing my payload and some other things that I can bring for enjoyment? No, absolutely not. So before you're gonna buy something, before you're gonna add it, carefully think about how much does it weigh and is there a lighter option? Because if there's a lighter option, I would really think carefully and long and hard about that version instead of just going for the metric that marketing wants you to focus on. In the case of the air compressor, how fast does it air up your tires? So carefully look at how much it weighs and see if you can find a different option that weighs less. And then finally, the third criteria that again, nobody seems to talk about, but is really important because we're all limited, is how much power does this thing use up? So the air compressor, I mean, it's got a 60 amp fuse straight to the battery. This thing uses a lot of power. And if I had gotten the Joule would use more power. So you're using up more power. Maybe now you need to have bigger battery reserves. Maybe then you need more solar panels, you need a bigger solar charge controller. Possibly you need to think about upgrading your alternator and the wiring to your alternator. So you can see if you choose the option that's bigger, it has all of these flow-on effects and it's gonna mess with the balance of your vehicle. So when we're building an overland vehicle, everything has to work together in harmony and it's all interconnected. You can't just suddenly choose to have the world's biggest and fastest air compressor because that's going to mess with all the other things that you then have to upgrade as well. And so soon enough, you'll be down the rabbit hole of upgrading basically everything and your vehicle's going to be way over payload. You're going to have stuff bolted on the outside. You're going to have a massive battery capacity and who knows how long that's going to take to even build. So before you buy an item for your vehicle, think long and hard about how much power that item uses and what it's going to do to your overall power needs to your vehicle. If it's going to force you to upgrade your battery storage, maybe you want to think twice about that item and see if there's a way you can solve that same problem but use up less power. Something you definitely want to consider before you just focus on how fast does the thing air up your tires or do whatever it's supposed to do. So I use the air compressor as the example in this video, but it's important to remember these three criteria, they apply to everything you're going to add to your vehicle, and it's just as important. Another great example I have is the fridge that I chose for this Jeep. I have a 35 litre Dometic, and I think a lot of people consider 35 litres too small, and they just immediately go to the 50 litre or even bigger than that. And you know, that's what marketing want you to do. They say, here's how many cans it can store. This is how many beverages you'll be able to have in your fridge. Therefore, bigger is better. But let's think about it. A bigger fridge, no doubt, takes up more interior space. I don't even know if I would have been able to build my interior living space if I had a 50 or 60 litre fridge. There's no question a bigger fridge is heavier. Not only the fridge itself, but now you're just going to fill it full of more heavy stuff. And of course, a bigger fridge uses more power. And that's a really important one because the fridge runs 24/7. There's every chance that my auxiliary battery wouldn't have been big enough if I had a bigger fridge. So now I'd have to upgrade my battery just to have a bigger fridge. And lots of people think 35 litres isn't enough. From experience, when there were two of us in the Jeep, when my girlfriend was with me in Namibia, in Botswana, South Africa, we had plenty of food and water for about 6 to 10 days. And the way that everything balanced out in the vehicle, we would actually start running out of drinking water and shower water and kind of fresh food all at about the same time. And we could have stayed out longer just eating like canned food or rice or potatoes or whatever. But at that point, we were kind of out of drinking water anyway. And at some point then it was like, why don't we head back into a village so we can have a shower, we can use the internet and we can resupply everything. So even if we'd had a bigger fridge, maybe we would have had more fresh food in there, but we wouldn't really have been able to use that capacity anyway because we would have been out of drinking water. So upgrading to a bigger fridge almost means I have to upgrade to a bigger water tank to enable the fridge, and so on and so forth. So this is what I mean about really think about which item you're adding to your vehicle and assess it with the three criteria I've talked about before you go buying just the biggest or the best or the fastest or whatever that item happens to be sold on as its marketing point. So for this whole video, I've been saying there are 3 important criteria, when in fact there's actually 4. And the 4th one is maybe the most important of all. Can you guess what it is? I'm going to talk about it in the next video. So if this has been helpful to you, please do hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and let me know down in the comments, what do you think about what I've said in this video? Are these the criteria that you've been judging equipment on, or is this going to shed new light on some of the decisions you've made? So as always, I hope it's been helpful, and maybe I'll bump into you on the road.